Here's what the facts say, here's what history says, here are the lessons we know we have learned, and let people draw their own conclusions. And I think what's so unfortunate right now in the world of broadcast media is I do think that a lot of conservative radio, certainly conservative television, they're not interested in facts. And that's ultimately where I think conservative media is going to have its downfalls, that Americans are hungry. They're just hungry for basic information, hungry for basic facts. You report like hell, you let the chips fall where they may. I think it's natural for all of us who care, who are passionate about politics, who feel like we have a sense about the difference between right and wrong. I think it's okay to let that be part of your coverage. It's important for all of us as broadcasters and journalists. In this day and age, we have to be authentic. You can't be the person who's up in the ivory tower that comes down and tells people, now you must eat your peas. No, it's all about, we all have personalities, and I think it's being aware sometimes of our own bias, but also being open to the idea that sometimes we're wrong, but we have a dialogue, and we have a passionate dialogue, and we care about this country, we care about this community, and I think that sort of passion is what carries us through.
Hear more from David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on Take Action News, on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
Good afternoon, America. Welcome to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. Welcome to We Act Radio, AM 1480. If you have not heard us before, you should hear us all the time. We are Washington, D.C.'s only commercial progressive radio station. My name is Mark Levine. I am a former congressional attorney. I've been on the air for about 10 years. But actually, the news that's in the news today relates to work I did when I was in Congress. Because, yes, while I worked on the House Judiciary Committee, they passed the USA Patriot Act. Heard about that? Yeah, that's the reason the government's spying on you. And I can tell you exactly how it happened, how it went down, how they rolled it over us so that Congress, virtually nobody read it in Congress because they had about an hour to vote on the thing, and why that is being used today. Now, let me say, first of all, for all the people complaining about President Obama spying on us, and I'm one of them, I'm one of those people that complains, let's all please remember, this is not a new program. This is a program that began under George W. Bush. This is a program that I complained about on the air when George W. Bush did it. This is nothing new. So if you're on the left and you care about civil liberties and you complained about George Bush doing this, then join me. Let's complain about it and let's make sure that the government's not spying on us when they don't need to. If, however, you're on the right and you didn't say peep when George Bush was doing exactly the same thing, actually a much broader program than what President Obama is doing right now, then you know what? You can't say a damn word. You cannot complain about a program more limited in scope than the original that's happening under President Obama if you didn't claim about it under President George W. Bush. So if you're on the left and you complained 8 years ago or you were under 18, then you're allowed to complain about it now. Call in 202-889-9797. If you're on the right, I dare you. I dare you to complain, because I remember back in 2005 when the New York Times first came out that the government was spying on all of us. They were taking hundreds of millions of Americans' phone records, That includes you, and that includes me. That includes anyone, by the way, that was with Verizon or AT&T or Sprint or just about any phone company in the United States with the exception of Quest. Quest, which I don't think even exists anymore, was the only phone company that turned down the government request to do warrantless wiretapping. Now, warrantless wiretapping may surprise you that it even occurs if you happen to know the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. If you happen to read the Bill of Rights, which I do, I keep my Constitution wherever I go, and I read these things because I think it's important to remember these things. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution says quite clearly, the right of the people, that's you, that's me, that's all of us, to be secure in their persons, individual persons. That's why you can't, by the way, force a woman to do things with her body that she doesn't want to do, namely to have or not have a child. The right of people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. You got it? If the government wants to check out our persons or our houses or our papers or our effects, that would include, believe it or not, email addresses. The founders, in their wisdom, in 1791, included such a broad category, our effects, that would include, yes, modern technology, emails, and the like. If the government wants to search all those things, okay, it cannot do so unreasonably, which to me, when you search everybody, that's unreasonable. You want to search, you got to describe particularly what you're searching, why you're searching it, what's the probable cause that you have to believe a crime has been committed. You go to a separate independent government official, a judge, and you get a warrant. And if you got that warrant, if you think someone's a terrorist and you getting a warrant to check them out, I'm fine with that. I'm all for getting a warrant and lawfully recording when we believe, probable cause to believe that criminal activity is occurring. No one is arguing with that. The question is, when can you do it without a warrant? And the answer is, you can't. You can't. You certainly can't do it with regard to American citizens. Now, you can make an argument the Fourth Amendment does not apply to people who are not American citizens. That's actually not a bad argument. You can make it, and I think it's probably the correct legal argument. So, back in 1978, the Congress passed the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act. And the idea was that, well, because foreigners are not Americans and because the Constitution doesn't apply to foreigners, we can basically monitor them. You know, and maybe if I were not an American citizen, maybe I'd be more upset about the government monitoring all the communications of anyone who's not an American citizen. Maybe it's completely selfish of me, but I am an American citizen. I was born here. I have those rights. And so I say, well, hey, at least they can't be spying on me, right? At least they can't be spying on me. Yeah, they're spying on those immigrants. They're spying on all those people that don't live here, but they're not spying on me. In fact, one government official said, the irony is that everyone spies on American citizens except the American government because of the Constitution, because we have the Fourth Amendment. But wait. You see, they can spy on me if I'm not just a foreigner, but also a foreign agent. An agent of a foreign power, someone working for a foreign government. Well, that's a lot broader. I mean, a lot of us work for companies that have foreign branches and that might include a foreign government. But even so, that would appear to limit the government collection to a mere millions of Americans. There are 350 million Americans, and the ones that are either foreigners or agents of foreign powers, let's say, are in the millions. In terms of American citizens, millions, maybe tens of millions, but not hundreds of millions, right? That's something. Except it's not. Because under the USA Patriot Act, under what George Bush has been up to, under what Obama is continuing, the government actually has been spying on all of us. Now, they say it hasn't been that bad. Here's what they know. They know who you talk to on the phone. They know how long you talked to them on the phone. And they know where you were when you talked to them. Driving down the road with your cell phone, talking to your mom, the government knows that you called your mom called you. They know what time and where you were. Now, you may think that's innocent. We have a country, by the way, where people say, I don't want to register my semi-automatic rifle. I don't want the government to know whether or not I have a gun capable of killing hundreds of people, even if I'm a terrorist, even if I'm a violent felon. I think that's ridiculous. I think the government has a right to know such things, just as the government has a right to know when you're driving cars. We register cars. And they say, well, we only use that knowledge when you've committed a crime. You do a hit and run. You hit someone with your car. Well, we have your license plate number. You shoot a bank and you get in the getaway car. You drive away. Well, we have your license plate number. That's when we use registration. So I'm okay with registering guns. But remember, all you right-wing, gun-loving people who say, I don't want the government to know that I have my gun. Which do you think the government has more right to do? To know that you have a dangerous firearm capable of killing hundreds of people, or that you did or did not call your mom on her birthday? That you were perhaps, I don't know, playing hooky from work, or walking into a porn shop. Remember, hey, the internet is, a lot of it's porn. How do you feel about the fact that the government knows every pornographic image you've ever viewed, even if it was sent to you unintentionally? Look, there are a lot of things we do that we don't necessarily want all of our fellow citizens to know about. And I'm okay with that. I go to a casino and I play poker. Well, I may not want everybody to know that. I'm telling you now. Now you know. But the point is, I believe in privacy. I believe we have a right to privacy. I believe that unless we have committed a crime or in the process of committing a crime, that we should have privacy, and that right is enshrined in our Constitution. So when we come back, I want to talk about the Patriot Act, how it developed, why we are where we are, and what, if anything, we should do about the fact that the government knows a heck of a lot more about us than I wish they knew. If you want to call in and join this discussion, it's easy to do. Just pick up the phone and dial 202-889-9797. 202-889-9797. This is Mark Levine. This is The Inside Scoop. We'll be right back right after this.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Friends, David Schuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
You're listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine, reporting live from Washington, D.C., where the government is spying on you. And the only thing that should surprise you about that is that people are surprised about that. I reported on the government spying on us way back when the George Bush administration began the whole spying enterprise back in, it was reported in the New York Times back in 2005. I know I've been on it since at least then. And, the government's spying on you. What they do is they collect all of your telephone information. They know who you called. They know who called you. They know how long you talked. They know where you were. If you're in a cell phone, they could track you if you're driving from cell phone tower to cell phone tower. And they do all of this without a warrant. Now, Obama says that before they go into more detail in that data, then they go ahead and they get a warrant. I say if all of this is exactly as it's going on, I may have no problem with it, but they didn't tell us exactly how it is, and I want to know why. I mean, I really think this is something that needs to be explored. I condemned this when Bush did it, and so I think it would be, inconsistent for me not to condemn it when Obama does it. But at the end of the day, I think we have a right to know exactly when and how the government is spying on us. Again, I have no problem with the government getting a warrant if they have reasonable, articulable, probable cause that they can show to a judge that a crime is being committed. I'm all for spying on criminals and terrorists. I am not for spying on hundreds of millions of Americans. Even if they just get that I talked to my mom for 20 minutes, someone could complain it was her birthday, Mark. You should have talked to her for 45. That is my business. Sorry, Mom. And I usually do call her on her birthday. This is merely hypothetical. But really, it's just none of the government's business. It's none of my fellow citizens' business. 202-889-9797. Michael from the Bronx. I should find some nickname for you, Michael, because you're clearly my most popular caller. How are you, sir? Michael, you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you. Go ahead.
Oh, I said that should I think of a nickname and send it to you on the Facebook message?
Yeah, we'll figure something out. You go ahead.
Yeah.
You can suggest some. We'll find one we jointly agree on. So, were you surprised that the government is collecting your phone records?
Basically, no.
Yeah, see, I wasn't either. I mean, I don't like it, but I wasn't surprised.
But I think the proper question is that, or the statement that you made earlier is, what is surprising is who is surprised. And I think the people that were surprised are predominantly those from the right. And the reason why I say this is because these were the same ones that were backing Bush and coming up with all sorts of excuses. We are in a post-9/11 world.
Exactly.
We have to sacrifice our rights for the safety of this nation, for your safety, for all of our safety, and blah, 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 blah. And each and every time we kept questioning the Bush administration and these GOPs, what were we slapped with? We were slapped with threats and false accusations of being unpatriotic, that we were enemy combatants.
The terrorists are going to win, Michael. The terrorists are going to win.
How many times have we heard that from Big Mouth Dick Cheney saying a vote for the Democrats is a vote for the terrorists?
Exactly. So here's the thing. I do think that we need to be careful and watch over the Obama administration for doing this. And I don't mind saying that and being critical. Frankly, like I said, if I weren't critical, then I would be inconsistent because I was critical when Bush was doing it. But here's the thing that I find surprising. This was exposed back in 2006. All Obama has done is reauthorize what Bush started, and apparently in a more limited fashion. According to President Obama, they basically they collect all the data, they store it. It's 500 quintillion pages, which is just a fantastic number. So a billion is 1,000 times a million, and a trillion is 1,000 times a billion. All right, a quintillion is a million times a trillion. So it's almost a billion times it's half a billion times a trillion pages of information. That's a heck of a lot of information. And as I argued back in 2005 when people were really concerned about this, and I was concerned too, I said the nicest thing about the government collection of data on us is they can't possibly read it all. Because there's, I forget how many, 30 billion or so emails sent a day. There's 350 million Americans. They just can't find out exactly when I called my mother because, you know what? Everyone calls their mother or doesn't. And all of those records, it's just too much for everybody to read. So that's the only protection we have. We have protection in numbers.
Well, actually, there's one major difference here, and it's not just in terms of the names George W. Bush and Barack Obama, but in the way that this whole matter is handling. First off, when you go back to the Bush years, remember, they were the ones that started this. So my message to the Republicans that are listening, you reap what you sow, all right? But the thing is that when Bush and company came up with this, they were constantly targeting the Democrats that were speaking out against the unconstitutional and unlawful actions. They're speaking out against the Iraq War. They're speaking out about how many innocent lives we are losing. And the only thing Bush kept saying was, stay the course, stay the course. Anyone that is in disagreement, we heard the same rhetoric over and over again. You're unpatriotic, you're enemy combatant. They were pretty much being bullies, and Bush was on record referring to the Constitution as a God-deed piece of paper. I mean, these are people that took an oath to abide by that sacred Constitution.
Okay, but to be fair, when President Obama does similar things, I think those of us that are liberal need to say, not just it's wrong when Bush does it, but it's wrong when Obama does it too. I don't like that every email I've ever sent or received, including some obnoxious spam email that I didn't request, but, we all know what spam email we get, right? Between Viagra ads and far worse, and suddenly that could be attributed to me. I don't believe the government needs to know every email I send. If I'm not plotting a terrorist plot, I would argue that only terrorist plots. Let's say, and I don't use drugs. I've never used drugs, but let's say I'm trying to score some marijuana, sorry, that crime is too small to have the federal government spy on me to find that out. That's way too big, brother. That's way too scary. I'll grant you if the Tsarnaev brothers are plotting something and they've been proven to have dropped, to bomb the Boston Marathon, then I'm fine with you going through their email. And you'll easily get probable cause to get a search warrant from a court and then, knock your lights out. Enjoy yourself. Go through all the Tsarnaev brothers and associates and all that stuff. That's fine. But for ordinary Americans, I find this really scary. And I don't like it when either the Bush administration does it or the Obama administration does it.
I don't like it either, but here's one thing about President Obama. First off, he is the one that's the constitutional scholar in comparison to Bush.
True.
All right, and thus Obama does comply with the law and the Constitution. In addition, let's not forget that ever since his 2008 campaign, and even after he got elected, he has been bombarded with a whole bunch of hate mail, of death threats, of people saying he's a Muslim, he's not an American.
Yeah, but that's I got to say, though, that's off the topic, Michael. I mean, you're absolutely right about that. I don't dispute that you're right about it. But whether or not the government should surveil ordinary Americans without a warrant, to me, here's the deal.
I don't think it's coming down. I'm sorry, Mark. I really honestly don't think it's coming down as much as we are hearing it. And then usually, how many times have we heard something of Obama has done this or Obama has done that?
Obama concedes this. This is not like, he's a Muslim or born in Kenya. This is not the craziness that they're right.
No, I know.
Obama concedes that no one disputes. No one disputes that this program exists. There is still some secretness with regard to the extent of the program, exactly how it works, how it's used, where they get warrants for. All of that, we still don't know all the answers to. But the fact that the program exists is not disputed by anybody. And I guess my concern is this. If we liberals don't complain about it when a Democrat's in office, then when a Republican gets in office and does it far, far worse, then it's like, they came for other people and I didn't speak out. Now they came for me and there was no one left to speak out. I mean, we've got to, frankly, now is our chance with our friend in office to find out exactly what the government is doing and to keep it to a tolerable level, because we have no such chance when a Republican's in office. So again, I and I'm not saying this is Obama's baby. I'm quite certain all he did was reauthorize what Bush did, and frankly, actually limited to some extent. But no matter who's in office, if we accept it when a Democrat's in office, then I guarantee you it will not be challenged by anybody for the next 100 years.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you, Mark, and I just want to clarify, I wouldn't accept it with no matter who's in office, but I just don't think that President Obama is actually abusing that particular the particular part of the Patriot Act, as some on the right has been hyping it up.
Well, Michael, he hasn't abused it as badly as Bush. I'll grant you that. But let's talk about what they're doing. So right now, they are collecting data on all of us, okay? There is a file on you, Michael. There's a file on me. There's a file on every single person listening to this broadcast. Mm-hmm. And that file shows every phone call we have made or received for many, many years. Now, I guess probably doesn't date back to the 90s. It may, who knows? But, it shows some of these, places, probably just since 2000, let's say. Notwithstanding that, I'm sure I have made or received thousands and thousands of phone calls, tens of thousands, in the last 13 years. And, yes, they say they're not listening to what I said and who said what to me, just the fact that I talked to a certain person for a certain amount of time. And they further say that this is going to relate to, agents of foreign government or foreign people. Now, I'm a radio host. That means I have contacted, I've done shows on the Syrian opposition. People have called into my show. I've talked to people off the air in preparing for the show. So I have called someone in Syria. Frankly, it wouldn't surprise me if someone, through some connection, there may even be a terrorist there. That does not make me a terrorist, and that doesn't mean that suddenly they have a right to check my mother because, she talked to me and I talked to someone who may be connected to a terrorist, and now suddenly, and then my mom's friends. I mean, how far does it go? To me, unless you have probable cause to believe that me, Mark Levine, has committed a crime, you shouldn't monitor my phone calls.
Or in the process of...
Oh, right. Or the process of committing a crime.
And that is the main core of the entire thing. Look, as I said, President Obama, as well as we Democrats and liberals, have been the target of the most vile, hateful rhetoric from the right. Since we are the ones that elected President Obama into office, we're the ones that favor the universal health care. We're the ones that are standing up against these pro-gun lobbying freaks. I mean, we are being met with absolute unending violence, and their call for more guns.
All true, Michael, but I gotta stick to my topic, though. I'll tell you what, I'm gonna take a break. Stay on with me, Michael. Let me take a break. When we come back, I want to focus on what you think is reasonable surveillance and what you think is unreasonable surveillance, because it's important to me to set a standard. I have conservatives listen to the show. I have liberals listen to the show. We need one standard for all Americans as to when the government can spy on us. We may disagree on what that standard is, but the standard cannot be, well, the right wing did it, now the left wing can do it. The answer is, what is the proper standard? I would argue the proper standard comes right out of the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. We'll be right back right after this. If you want to call in, it's 202-889-9797. More of the Inside Scoop right after this.
Listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without Big Brothers Big Sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college? Joe Thompson? Not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil, and Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child, and that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine, reporting live from We Act Radio Studios right here on the banks of the Anacostia River in Washington, D.C. You can call in and join the discussion at 202-889-9797. Listen in on 1480 AM. You can also comment, by the way, on my website at marklevinetalk.com. Follow me on Twitter at marklevinetalk. So, we're talking about the government spying on us, and I'm telling you, this is old news. This is old news. This has been going on since the Bush administration, but just because it's old news doesn't mean that I like it. I had problems then. If you go to my website, you search in the archives, you will see show after show where I complain about the Bush administration spying on hundreds of millions of Americans without a warrant. And again, I think the touchstone should be the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment to the Constitution allows the government to spy on us if the government has probable cause to believe we've committed a crime, goes to an independent judge and says, hey, here are the particular things I want to search. You have to be particular. The word particular is in the Fourth Amendment. In the document you file, the warrant that you try as a prosecutor to get, supported by oath, you have to particularly describe, this is an exact quote from the Fourth Amendment, you have to particularly describe the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So you have to say, I'm spying on this person for this reason to find out this, because I believe this person has committed a crime, and here's my probable cause to think that I've done this. Then the court issues you a warrant, and then go to town, spy on all those terrorists. I'm fine with that. No one is complaining about searches you get by a warrant. We are, however, complaining about this mass data dump, which is what it is. It's a data dump, and the government, somewhere in some file in the NSA or maybe in that new facility in Utah they're building, they have got every single phone call you or I or anyone you know has ever made, at least since, let's say, 2000-something, 2003, 4, 5. For the last 8 years, the government knows everyone we've called. Now, they tell us they won't use this information. I say, you know what? If you're not going to use it, then save it. Maybe. I'm not even sure about that. But okay, worst case scenario, save it and say that no one can enter this file. No one can go into this file, this massive saved file, without a warrant. Now, maybe Obama's doing that. That seems to be what he's claiming, but we need it spelled out, because if we don't monitor this now, I guarantee you it will get worse. And soon, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, we really do have Big Brother looking into all of our business. I don't know. I'm not usually paranoid about these things, but I think the right to privacy matters. And I don't think that if you haven't done anything wrong, the government, look, you may have, my old boss, Barney Frank, used to give this as an example, and I thought it was a funny one. He said, you may have a foot fetish. You may have a magazine subscription to Feet magazine. You may be all about feet. And you know what? That's pretty harmless. You're really not going to hurt anybody with your foot fetish, but it might not be something that you want every last person you meet to know about you. We have a right to privacy. We have a right to the little things that we do that we don't necessarily want the whole world to know about, not because they're criminal, but because they're embarrassing. And frankly, I think the right to privacy is one of those great rights enshrined in the American Constitution. So that being said, I complained about it under George W. Bush. I'm going to complain about it under Barack Obama. My caller, Michael from New York, a frequent caller. We're going to find a name for him. Give him a name soon enough. But a frequent caller to the Inside Scoop. I'm going to think of one. You know what? I don't think you can name yourself, Mike. I'm going to have to come up with a name. And next time you call, I'll have it for you. All right? Michael has properly condemned the right wing for being inconsistent about this, for not complaining about it under George W. Bush, for being really harsh on Obama. But I hope you get my point, Michael, which is that if we on the left aren't defending civil liberties in America, no one will, particularly when our guy's in office. You get my point.
I get it, and I am in complete agreement with you on that. And yes, we would need to keep President Obama in check to ensure that he does not cross the line. I hope that he doesn't cross the line the way Bush did. The way I see it, though, and you hit and I apologize if I wasn't making myself clear when I brought up some past instances. I was tying that together with what you had said, Mark, about people who have committed criminal acts or in the process of committing criminal acts, that there is sufficient cause and just cause to get a warrant against those particular offenders. What I see happening here, Mark, is that this whole Patriot Act and what initially began as a warrantless spying by the Bush administration was spying upon law-abiding, patriotic Americans who had every single right to stand up and voice their concerns of things that were not going correct in this nation and what was happening to our fellow human beings. They were the ones that were being targeted, those who opposed Bush and Cheney for whatever reason. It was absolute lawless administration.
Well, yeah, look, we know that there were a number of groups that were infiltrated by the Bush administration. I remember famously, this is the one that bothered me the most. I'm sure there were many, but the one that bothered me most is I remember there was a group of Quaker women in Vermont that had a meeting opposed to the Iraq War. Now, if you know anything about the Quaker religion, you know they're pacifists. They're opposed to all wars. Somehow, I really don't think that a meeting of Quaker women in Vermont talking about their opposition to the Iraq War is the kind of terrorist plot that the government needs to be spying on. I just remember that one because that was like the worst one, because clearly these are harmless people. We can argue about whether or not pacifism is a good idea or not, but clearly these people were not pacifists. Do not pose a terrorist threat to the United States. Okay, you can disagree with their philosophy, but I really don't think a pacifist is. Oh no, that pacifist organization set a bomb. No, I don't think so. So you're absolutely right, Michael. They did spy on all of us, and I read 1984. I'm concerned about Big Brother. You don't need a big. We look. If you've read 1984, you know that Winston, the main character, has this monitor of Big Brother who's speaking in his TV, and the TV is a two-way thing. So today we watch TV and we just see it; they don't see us. But in 1984, in the book by George Orwell, they see you. And we're getting closer and closer to that world, it seems to me. We have surveillance cameras in every corner. You know what? I understand why they're there. I like them when they're used to catch a criminal. No question. They worked in the Boston Marathon event. But I wouldn't want them in my own home. You know,
you wouldn't want them in your own.
No, and you know what? It's one thing to monitor the telephone conversations between the mob and the drug boss. You know, fine with that. But you know, whether or not I call my mom on her birthday is none of your business. And what I watch on the internet, I'm sorry, is none of your business. I can watch. I go and I click a YouTube video and it seems funny or whatever, and then I click a related video, and suddenly I've gotten to some really disturbing stuff. I didn't mean to get there. I was just clicking around. That doesn't mean I believe in that philosophy. I'm concerned that suddenly everything I do, when viewed in the worst possible light, any of us can be made to look pretty awful.
But Mark, here's the thing that, excuse me, the situation is that just as we were just chronicling of how Bush and company were using the Patriot Act, who was the one group that was not really being, what's the word I'm looking for, surveillance there? It was the people on their own side. And then thus, when you find that they kept engaging in a whole bunch of unlawful acts, but then under their standards, we couldn't say anything or take a stand. We had to keep our mouths shut. But now with President Obama in office, as you said, those who commit a crime or are in the process of committing a crime, the way I see it is that these same GOPs who sponsored or were so favored for the Patriot Act probably counted on lifetime immunity, no accountability. Is there any wonder why they always want less government? But then now they're shocked that they too are now included into as terms of the possible spying and the possible surveillance.
Well, we're all being surveilled. It's not a question of left or right.
But they weren't being surveilled while Bush was in office. But then all the stuff that they were doing since Obama's been in office, that probably gives the administration or any federal investigation probable cause to really surveillance these people. These people really may have dug a big hole for themselves, and the thing is that had they complied and respected with everyone's rights, respect the rights of others, and just engage in civility and not engage in this whole violence and terrorists and what's what I'm looking for, inciting the hatred.
Yeah.
They wouldn't.
I just want to be real careful here. Free speech is free speech. People have the right to say some pretty awful things in America. I support their right to say these. I don't support the awful things, but I do support their right to say it. The heart of the question, I think, is why the government feels it's necessary to collect records on all of us. Look, I don't like when credit card companies do it. I don't like when they data mine me. I don't like that everyone knows, that in 1993 I purchased, I bought something that I don't want everyone to know that I bought. Just everything I do, everything I buy, everywhere I go, everyone I talk to, it's being monitored, and I find it scary. And the answer is I don't believe right now the government is using that information to get me. I mean, I'm not that paranoid. I know some on the right are. I don't think they're actually, using this information yet. But I guess my concern is if they collect it, they can use it. And it's just so ironic to me, so powerfully ironic, that the same right wing that doesn't want the government to know if you have a very dangerous weapon, a semi-automatic rifle with a 100-drum round, that you're buying explosives on the internet. They don't want you to know if you're doing that. But whether you call your mom or not, and whether you have a foot fetish or not, or whether you smoke marijuana, or whether you're driving down the road at 3 a.m., leaving the house of some woman, whatever it is, whatever you're doing, that they think the government has a right to know about. That's completely crazy. Guns are dangerous. The other things I've described may be embarrassing, but they're definitely not dangerous. So I just want to make sure that we all can join together and say, government, you have to tell us exactly who you're spying on and why. And if you're spying on foreign agents, I'm okay with that. but you have to be limited to that. And I think when they say it's legal, okay, what they're saying is it's within the scope of some very broad laws Congress passed. And I'm going to describe those actually after the break because I was around when they passed the USA Patriot Act, and I can tell you about that one. But it is within the scope of these laws. But let us never forget that every law in the United States is also required to be within the scope of the Constitution. And the Constitution and the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, which I've read now 4 or 5 times on the air, which very few Americans can cite, saying the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. You know, the founders did a lot of things wrong. We can talk about slavery. We can talk about women's rights. They did a heck of a lot of things wrong. But they got this one right. And it's still in our Constitution, and we have to, as far as I'm concerned, honor these words unless and until they're changed. And it may be legal under statutory law, but I don't think it's constitutional. And the other thing about it is, and we'll get to this when I come back from break, is that these laws can almost never be challenged because it's a secret court and because you can't even know when you're being spied on to challenge those things. So it's a real catch-22. Michael, one last word, and then I'm going to go to break and talk about my role in the USA Patriot Act. Go ahead.
Yes, like I said, I'm totally in agreement with you that, we need to stay within the scope of the Constitution on both sides, okay? But in terms of the right-wingers who didn't have a problem under Bush, but have a problem under Obama, it's quite ironic that they always say that, that we have to give up our rights and blah, 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 but yet they never, ever want to practice what they preach.
Yep.
And a prime example of that is what's going on here in New York City. I guess we could touch base on that another time, comparing the Patriot Act with the NYPD's unconstitutional, unlawful stop and frisk. That why the hell is it that the GOP's favor the stop and frisk that's targeting minorities exclusively, but they have a problem with the now the Patriot Act applying to them? It's like, how the hell is it? They want to be Big Brother, but then they sure as hell hate being watched.
And for those of you who don't know, Michael often leaves information about this, what's going on in the NYPD, on my fan page, the Mark Levine fan page on Facebook. You can join and like it, read what Michael's written there, and respond to him. You can also go to my website if you want to comment there on this or anything else, marklevinetalk.com. Thank you, Michael, for calling in. I'm going to have a name for you next time you call in. I don't know what it's going to be, but we'll find some clever name.
If I think of something, I'll send it to you as well.
Okay, but I kind of think it's the right of the talk show host to choose the name. Don't worry, it won't be derogatory, but I'm going to try to think of something clever and fun. Anyway, thank you very much for calling in, as usual, Michael. When we come back...
Always a pleasure.
Thank you, Michael. When we come back, I want to talk about my personal role working on Capitol Hill in helping to draft... watch out for the tomatoes are coming through the window. Helping to draft part of the USA Patriot Act. And I'm going to tell you what went wrong, because I got to tell you, it went terribly wrong. This is Mark Levine. This is The Inside Scoop. Follow me on Twitter at marklevinetalk.com. We'll be right back right after this.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
My name is Joe Thompson. I'm 29 years old and I have a career that I love as a systems analyst. Career. It still sounds cool to say that word. I never could have gotten on this path without a college degree. And if the college me were here, he'd tell you.
I never would have gotten to college without big brothers, big sisters. I could have ended up anywhere, on the streets even. But college, Joe Thompson, not likely. My big brother helped me out. He taught me I could do anything, at a time when a lot of people were saying just the opposite.
And to a 7-year-old, that means a lot. My big brother's name is Phil. And Phil is the reason that this 7-year-old grows up to be a systems analyst.
Whether you donate money or time, you're helping Big Brothers Big Sisters help a child. And that can last a lifetime. Start something today at bigbrothersbigsisters.org. Brought to you by Big Brothers Big Sisters and the Ad Council.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine. A happy, beautiful Sunday to you. I got to tell you, the weather is just perfect. I love this time of year. This beginning of June, end of May. It's just you go outside and the weather is perfect. And you actually sometimes I think don't appreciate it enough. But on those days, which are coming in July and August, when it's 100 degrees outside, thank you, global warming, or in the winter, when it's really cold, just remember we do occasionally, even in Washington, D.C., have days like today. So I'm talking, of course, about the government spying on us. And many people know that the right to do that comes out of a lot of legislation passed after September 11, 2001. But the granddaddy of it all, the one that most Americans know about, the one that most Americans complain about, is the Patriot Act. What is the Patriot Act, or more specifically, the USA Patriot Act? Well, Patriot is an acronym. You know how when they want to pass something that sounds good, they give it a wonderful acronym. It's providing adequate tools to restrict and intercept something terrorism. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I worked on the Patriot Act, and it was back in September 11th. So let's see what the acronym is. Providing adequate tools to intercept and providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. All right, I got it. I pretty much got it, right? Got it from my memory. All right, so September 11th, I was working for Congressman Barney Frank. I worked on the House Judiciary Committee, which is the committee that drafted the USA Patriot Act. And following that horrible attack, where I got to say, I was sitting in Congress in the Rayburn House office building, watching the planes hit the trade centers. I turned on the TV as soon as I heard the first one hit, and then watched the second one hit, watched the first one go to the ground, saw the Pentagon in flames. And then, that day, after being stuck for a while in traffic because they closed down all the bridges, I left, went home to my home in Virginia, and saw the Pentagon in flames. That's quite a terrifying sight. And most Americans were pretty terrified after September 11th, and I understand why. I mean, 3,000 innocent people were murdered by a foreign terrorist group. That's enough to scare anybody. When that happened, President George Bush was famously reading My Pet Goat to a bunch of first graders and kind of didn't know what to do, and so for 7 minutes just kept reading rather than excusing himself. And I remember thinking at that time, I remember saying to Barney Frank, I remember saying to everyone, this is war. This is war. This is Pearl Harbor. This will be remembered like Pearl Harbor. This is war, and we've got to defend ourselves. I think, frankly, liberals and conservatives agree together that when 3,000 innocent Americans are murdered, you've got to do something about it. But in the weeks that followed, I also recognize that in times of fear, in times of war, in times of massive terrorist attacks, those are the times when we have to be most careful to protect our civil liberties, because that's the time when the government is most likely to overreach. We should not ever forget the American concentration camps, where Japanese Americans, mostly on the West Coast, were rounded up, innocent people taken from their homes and put in camps. Now, they weren't murdered like the Nazi concentration camps, but they were definitely put in these detainee camps for no other crime but their ancestry. No other crime but being born Japanese American. And they were kept in camps for 5 years because our government got nervous. Not that an individual Japanese American was planning an attack. That would have been, if they had knowledge that, a certain Japanese or American citizen was planning an attack like Pearl Harbor, lock them up, throw them in jail. I'm not sympathetic to terrorists. And I'm not sympathetic to the people who carried out Pearl Harbor, not one iota. On the other hand, the vast majority of Japanese Americans were innocent people trying to live their lives just like other Americans. So in times of national crisis, we have to be very concerned about national overreach. And we knew that. And to the credit of Pat Leahy, senator from Vermont, one of my favorites, by the way, when the Bush administration demanded that when 1 week after September 11th, Congress had to pass a law that allowed us to better go after terrorists, Pat Leahy resisted. I remember that. He was chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee in 2001. The Republicans controlled the House of Representatives at that time. And the Senate was 50-50, with the deciding vote originally cast by Vice President Cheney. But then Jim Jeffords of Vermont switched parties from Republican to Democrat, and in doing so gave the Democrats a bare majority in the Senate. So we had the majority, but it was just barely so. And the Republicans saw their opportunity to push a lot of things down the Democrats' throat, right? America's scared. There's been a vicious terrorist attack. We're all very nervous. This is a great time to get these things. And there was this wish list of things the Justice Department wished to do that had been passed around really for decades, from the first George Bush, from Bill Clinton, into the second George Bush administration, where basically they would spy on all of us. And that wish list is what became the Patriot Act. But I'm getting ahead of the story. So the Republicans, not so much the Republicans in Congress, honestly, but at this point it was the Bush administration, came up with this wish list and said, hey, we want all this power to spy on anyone without a warrant, without going to a court, to do it in massive numbers, and to do it secretly so that no one can ever challenge it. And Pat Leahy said, whoa. The Democratic chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee said, wait a minute. These kinds of vast spying powers are likely unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment, but at the very least, they need to be talked about. They need to be studied. We need to make sure that everything is makes sense before we put in this law that could take away Americans' right to privacy for a generation, forever, really, until the law is repealed. So they came over to the House, and they said, hey, House of Representatives, you're controlled by Republicans. At least you can pass this stuff. Jim Sensenbrenner was the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee when I worked there. The ranking member was Congressman John Conyers. Number 2 on the committee was Congressman Barney Frank. John Conyers and Barney Frank were actually right here in these radio studios, right here at We Act Radio, a few months back on the retirement of Barney Frank from Congress, and to celebrate the, I think I've lost count, 35th year or so, 40? God, John Conyers has been around so long, I don't remember. I think it's almost more than 40 years. I think he's been around since the 60s. Wow, I think his 50th anniversary is coming up. Anyway, to celebrate his longevity and also to celebrate Barney Frank's retirement. These two people, the ranking Democrat and the second ranking Democrat in the House Judiciary Committee, were right here honoring me, honoring the Inside Scoop, honoring We Act Radio. But I was working for them at that very tense time. And Jim Sensenbrenner, the Republican, one of the impeachment managers, somebody who led the impeachment of Bill Clinton, certainly someone who's strongly anti abortion, anti a woman's right to choose. He's certainly a very conservative Republican. To his credit, Jim Sensenbrenner also told Bush no originally. He originally said back in September 2001, hold your horses. We'll get something out for you, Bush administration, in a few weeks, but we want to carefully examine what we need to do to provide the tools to fight terrorism, but also to protect Americans' right to privacy and our rights under the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution to be secure in our persons and our effects from seizures or searches absent a warrant. So the head Democrat on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Pat Leahy, said, slow down, Bush. And the head Republican on the House Judiciary Committee, Jim Sensenbrenner, said, slow down, Bush. And then came 6 weeks from September to October of 2001, of which I think were probably the proudest time for the House Judiciary Committee, probably in decades. We worked hard. We staffers, Democrats and Republicans, we knocked heads. We went into a room and we argued. And we said, all right, we do need to break down the barriers between the FBI and the CIA because that was part of the missed connecting the dots that led to September 11th. We need to have the CIA and the FBI share information. Okay, we Democrats, we're going to give you that one. Republicans, that one makes sense. But Republicans need to give us Democrats protections against civil liberties. Protections saying you can't spy on someone without a warrant. You know, you want a warrant, you got to go and you got to name the person to be seized and you got to find particularity and all of that. It's in the Fourth Amendment. So it was a balance. And we came up with really a beautiful piece of legislation, 200 pages long, not too long by congressional standards, that laid out careful tools that the government could use to go after terrorists. And at the same time, careful protections for every American citizen. We decided to leave out non-American citizens, sorry immigrants, sorry foreigners, but careful protections that every American citizen would have against the government unlawfully spying on you. And then something happened in the House Judiciary Committee, which I dare say has not happened at any other time in the last 40 years. On such an important controversial bill, dealing with protecting America from terrorists and also protecting civil liberties, the 30-odd members of the House Judiciary Committee, which consisted of right-wing Republicans like Lamar Smith, Jim Sensenbrenner, but also really, really right-wing people. Lindsey Graham was on the committee at the time. But Lamar Smith was probably the worst bomb thrower, Republican from Texas. This was the impeachment committee. These are the people that impeached Bill Clinton, far, far right-wing Republicans. And some very left-wing Democrats. I love Maxine Waters. She gives me a hug every time she sees me, but she's certainly not a moderate or even a liberal. She's definitely on the left end of the Democratic Party. And people like Barney Frank and John Conyers, solid progressives, Mel Watt, Bobby Scott, who probably cares more about civil liberties than any other member of Congress, at least so far as I've seen, congressman from Virginia, did something amazing. Because in October of 2001, every single Republican and every single Democrat voted for the first draft of what later became the USA Patriot Act. And we all thought it was a brilliant compromise that protected every American's civil rights, protected every American's civil liberties, at the same time gave the government the tools it needed to go after terrorism. And when that vote happened, and it was unanimous, and it's the only unanimous vote we ever did on a very contentious committee, outside of naming a few post offices or really unimportant things like that. We had big fights over abortion, over guns, over immigration, over civil rights. I mean, we didn't agree on anything. But on this first draft of the USA Patriot Act, every single member of Congress, from Maxine Waters on the far left to Lamar Smith on the far right, voted for this bill. And when it happened, something I've never seen before or since happened, everyone in the room stood up and gave a standing ovation. The people in the audience gave a standing ovation. We staffers gave a standing ovation. The members of Congress stood up and gave themselves a standing ovation. Now, we staff, frankly. We deserve the ovation because we wrote most of the bill. But we were very proud of our ability as Americans, as Democrats and Republicans, as liberals and conservatives, to come together in the middle of a national crisis when 3,000 Americans are murdered, to come together to give the government the power it needed to fight those horrible terrorists that we all wanted to see them destroyed, and at the same time protect American civil liberties. We were very proud of ourselves. Very proud of ourselves. So anytime something that good happens in Washington, and by the way, when's the last time you heard people in an audience stand up at a committee hearing and give members of Congress a standing ovation? I mean, Congress is not really held that high esteem in America anymore. So we did it. Democrats, Republicans, far left, far right came to an agreement, a solid agreement to protect us from terrorist attacks, to protect civil liberties, to do the right thing. We told Bush to slow down, but we got it done within 6 weeks. What happened to the first version of the Patriot Act? It did not become law. Why would a bill supported by every single member of Congress from the far right to the far left not become law? How did we get the current Patriot Act we have and not the original draft, which I helped draft? What happened? Well, stick around. I'll tell you right after this break. This is Mark Levine. This is the Inside Scoop. Feel free to call in if you want, 202-889-9797. I'll tell you what happened with the USA Patriot Act. I was there as a congressional attorney to Congressman Barney Frank. I'll tell you what happened right after this.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com. Take Action News with David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
Well, for me, it's always been, you report the facts. You report like hell, let the chips fall where they may. And the truth ultimately is what's going to sort of help our society and help all of us. I don't think progressives want a thumb on the scale on the facts. They just want the facts out there. You let the facts out, and progressives will tell you, we're going to win 70% of the time. You may quibble with the percentages or whatnot, but I think that's just sort of what progressives are looking for, and I think that's where this all sort of meshes with my interest as a journalist. And my interest as a journalist is report the facts. Here's what's going on. Here's what the facts say. Here's what history says. Here are the lessons we know we have learned. And let people draw their own conclusions. And I think what's so unfortunate right now in the world of broadcast media is I do think that a lot of conservative radio, certainly conservative television, they're not interested in facts. And that's ultimately where I think conservative media is going to have its downfalls. That Americans are hungry. They're just hungry for basic information, hungry for basic facts. You report like hell. You let the chips fall where they may. I think it's natural for all of us who care, who are passionate about politics, who feel like we have a sense about the difference between right and wrong. I think it's okay to let that be part of your coverage. It's important for all of us as broadcasters and journalists. In this day and age, we have to be authentic. You can't be the person who's up in the ivory tower that comes down and tells people, now you must eat your peas. No, it's all about, we all have personalities, and I think it's being aware sometimes of our own bias, but also being open to the idea that sometimes we're wrong, but we have a dialogue, and we have a passionate dialogue, and we care about this country, we care about this community, and I think that sort of passion is what carries us through.
Hear more from David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on Take Action News, on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
Hello, this is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and I want to tell you about my new favorite discovery, Yosemite National Park. I recently went there with my husband and children, and we walked the trails to see the breathtaking waterfalls, admired the grand meadows and giant sequoias. But the future of our national parks is uncertain. Many challenges face our parks today, from polluted air and water to development threats outside their borders and inadequate funding to protect our national heritage. That's why the National Parks Conservation Association recently completed a decade-long assessment of the challenges facing our national parks, along with proposed actions that will ensure our children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy the parks as we have. Our national parks have inspired Americans for nearly 100 years. As we approach the centennial of the National Park Service in 2016, please join us in helping to protect our national park legacy. Find out how at www.mpca.org.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine. So prior to the break, I was telling you about really the glorious compromise that we Republicans and Democrats all came together on, unanimously agreed. You could almost hear Kumbaya being sung as we all stood up and gave each other a standing ovation because the House Judiciary Committee in October 2001 had managed, although it was the most contentious ideological committee possible, from Maxine Waters on the left to Lamar Smith on the right, violent disagreements, well, not violent, but seemed violent, strong disagreements on everything from immigration to abortion to gay civil rights to gun laws and all that stuff. But we came together and we agreed on the perfect balance, we thought, between allowing the government the tools it needed to go after terrorists and at the same time protecting civil liberties. We passed this bill in the House Judiciary Committee. The Bush Justice Department was not getting what they wanted in that bill. That bill had substantial protections for civil liberties. That bill did not allow Americans to be spied on without a warrant. It required, absent an emergency, it required the government to have reasonable, articulable particularity, suspicion, just like it has to have in the Fourth Amendment to go after a crime. Well, that wasn't good enough for the Justice Department. And the Bush administration was saying day in, day out, if we don't pass a very strong piece of legislation, we in Congress, there is going to be another terrorist attack. And thousands more Americans would be dead, and it would be the Democrats' fault. At that time, Tom Daschle was the majority leader of the Senate. And he'd just gotten that post because Jim Jeffords had switched parties, so he had only been there a few weeks when September 11th occurred. And Bush said, Tom Daschle, if we have another terrorist attack, it's your fault. It's the Democrats' fault because you didn't pass legislation immediately like I demanded, giving us all the power of complete surveillance over every American citizen. Tom Daschle got nervous. He was a senator from South Dakota, a state that, while electing Democrats at sometimes its one House seat and 2 Senate seats, almost invariably has voted for Republicans in the presidential elections since I don't know. I know they voted for Republicans. Obama, Bush, Clinton, Bush, Reagan, Carter. They voted for the Republican. Ford, Kennedy. I don't think they voted for. You may have to go back to Lyndon Johnson in 1964 to find where South Dakota voted for a Democrat. So this is a heavily Republican state. And Tom Daschle was worried that he was going to lose his election. So using his power as Senate Majority Leader, I told you how Pat Leahy, chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, was holding up the Bush administration, really to support a bill much like the one that we pat ourselves on the back on as passing in the House. Well, the Bush administration pushed and pushed and pushed, and they scared Tom Daschle, who would end up later losing his seat anyway. Anyway, they scared him enough that he went ahead and rolled right over Pat Leahy and said, we're not going to do this in committee. We're not going to do this in regular order. We're going to give the Bush administration everything it wants. And the USA Patriot Act, when it passed the Senate, Patriot was the name given in the House, USA was the name given in the Senate. Love these patriotic names. My boss, Barney Frank, hated these acronyms because who wants to vote against USA? Who wants to vote against the Patriot? I'm a patriot. That doesn't mean I support everything in the Patriot Act. It's a very silly Orwellian name. But the Senate bill, the USA bill, basically gave the Justice Department everything they wanted. All of the unlimited, virtually unlimited surveillance tools that are still being used today. And the Senate passed the bill and threw it back in the House. Now, we in the House had our bill. It was the bill that everyone agreed on. It was the bill that Maxine Waters on the left and Lamar Smith on the right agreed on. From the far left to the far right to everyone in between, libertarians, civil libertarians, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, progressives, conservatives, all agreed this was the best compromise. But the Bush administration didn't want that one. Had too many protections for American citizens. So they said to Jim Sensenbrenner, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, we want you to pass the Senate bill. Senate bill, by the way, passed 99-1. Senator Russ Feingold of Wisconsin, Democrat, was the only member of the Senate to vote against it. Everyone else was just too scared. So they threw it on our lap in the House, and they gave us an hour to vote on it, to read it and vote on it. You know, the law says that you have to give a day, that you can't pass legislation that's been introduced the same day. Because they want to give you, I guess, 24 hours to read the stuff, to read the 200-page piece of legislation before it becomes law. But, you know, day is not clearly defined. And so when does a day end? When does it begin? Please don't tell me something silly like midnight, some clear standard. No, that's normal. That's the way, you know, most of us think of days. No. They said they could define days whatever they wanted. So what they did is, and I think it was a Thursday and a Friday. May have been a Wednesday and a Thursday. They said, all right, Thursday ends at 9 a.m. on Friday morning, and Friday begins at 10 a.m. on Friday morning. And that way they could introduce the bill at 9 a.m. and force everyone to vote on it at 10 a.m. And I'm quite confident the vast majority of the House hadn't read the bill. But Sensenbrenner agreed to it because the Bush administration was twisting his arm pretty badly. Tom Daschle agreed to it because the Bush administration was twisting his arm pretty badly. And our beautifully written compromise that took us 6 weeks, hard work by staffers, and got the agreement of everyone from Maxine Waters on the far left to Lamar Smith on the far right, the one that gave us a standing ovation, the unanimous work by Congress that caused everyone in the room to give us a standing ovation, got unceremoniously thrown into the trash bin. Instead, the Justice Department wish list became the USA Patriot Act. And my former boss, Congressman Barney Frank, to his credit, voted against it. Voted against it even though we actually managed to get a tiny amendment in there. It was never really used. It was called the Frank Amendment. I wrote it, 5 pages. That basically says that if your civil liberties have been violated, you can sue the government and get damages. That provision, by the way, timed out. It was not renewed and is no longer in the legislation. So I can say I wrote 5 pages of the first USA Patriot Act. But before you throw things at me, recognize that my 5 pages protected civil liberties and is no longer in the act. I did not write the rest of it, the part that I'm complaining about today. Why hasn't my little amendment, the Frank Amendment, been used? Well, because most Americans don't know when the government's spying on them, even though we know now from these press accounts that the government is spying on hundreds of millions of us. When groups went to the United States Supreme Court and said, hey, we want the government to stop spying on us, the Supreme Court said, by 5-4, prove the government's spying on you. And the citizen suing said, we can't prove it because it's top secret, but we have reason to believe they're spying on us. And they said, you know what? That's speculative. We're not going to grant you any relief. But what if they had been able to prove it? If they'd been able to prove they'd been spied on, that was because of a government leak, and then they could go to jail for finding out something that's top secret. So you see, it's a lose-lose situation. Either you complain about it and they say, sorry, there's no proof, or you find a leaker and that leaker goes to jail for proving what you already know, even though now the press has reported it, and it's obvious that, yes, hundreds of millions of Americans are being spied on. So what do we do about this? You have a secret court, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, we'll get to that in just a minute, that pretty much rubber stamps all of the presidential requests. How should the government spy on the American people, if at all? I'm going to try to answer that question when we come back. If you want to call in, please do at 202-889-9797. This is Mark Levine. This is The Inside Scoop. We'll be right back, right after this.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Does your child have difficulty controlling their anger or a history of academic failure in school? Options Public Charter School offers a therapeutic learning environment with small classroom sizes and on-site counseling services to help students succeed. Options PCS is now enrolling grades 5 through 11 for the upcoming school year. For more information, call Options PCS today at 202-547-1028. Options Public Charter School. Exceptional education for exceptional students.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
Take Action News with David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
Well, for me, it's always been, you report the facts. You report like hell, let the chips fall where they may. And the truth ultimately is what's going to sort of help our society and help all of us. I don't think progressives want a thumb on the scale on the facts. They just want the facts out there. You let the facts out, and progressives will tell you, we're going to win 70% of the time. You may quibble with the percentages or whatnot, but I think that's just sort of what progressives are looking for, and I think that's where this all sort of meshes with my interest as a journalist. And my interest as a journalist is report the facts. Here's what's going on. Here's what the facts say. Here's what history says. Here are the lessons we know we have learned. And let people draw their own conclusions. And I think what's so unfortunate right now in the world of broadcast media is I do think that a lot of conservative radio, certainly conservative television, they're not interested in facts. And that's ultimately where I think conservative media is going to have its downfalls, that Americans are hungry. They're just hungry for basic information, hungry for basic facts. You report like hell, you let the chips fall where they may. I think it's natural for all of us who care, who are passionate about politics, who feel like we have a sense about the difference between right and wrong. I think it's okay to let that be part of your coverage. It's important for all of us as broadcasters and journalists. In this day and age, we have to be authentic. You can't be the person who's up in the ivory tower that comes down and tells people, now you must eat your peas. No, it's all about, we all have personalities, and I think it's being aware sometimes of our own bias, but also being open to the idea that sometimes we're wrong, but we have a dialogue, and we have a passionate dialogue, and we care about this country, we care about this community, and I think that sort of passion is what carries us through.
Hear more from David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on Take Action News, on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is Mark Levine talking about the government surveillance on all of us, which, as I have told you, I reported right here on the Inside Scoop 8 years ago when the Bush administration first started it. Talking about the USA Patriot Act, which allowed it, I got to say, it's pretty much through a loophole in it, even though the Justice Department gave the Bush administration everything they wanted. Congress gave the Bush Justice Department everything they wanted, the wish list. They still construed it very, very broadly. And so who monitors this? The government says they're not misusing the information, right? Who monitors this? Well, the people that monitor it are a secret court called the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. The Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act began in 1978, and it was done so that we could monitor intelligence from foreigners or foreign agents of foreign governments, which could include American citizens. What happens in this court? Well, it's a secret court. Its findings are not published. 99+% of them are not published. They're not even published in redacted form. I mean, you could imagine where they grant the government a search warrant. You don't give the name. You just say, blank, a Yemeni national was granted a search warrant because the government found that he had been in association with blank, a well-known terrorist group, you could put in brackets, and had talked to blank, member of well-known terrorist group, at blank on such and such blank date, 2011. All right. Okay, that sounds like probable cause to me. I don't know the names of the people who talked. I don't know the names of the terrorist organization. I mean, I gotta have some faith, I guess. But at least I have an idea of what they're granting a warrant over. We really need to push the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court to be more proactive, more transparent, to publish at least redacted versions of their hearings, because their hearings are not the way it normally goes, where you've got a prosecutor and a criminal defense lawyer, and they go in and they argue, and the prosecutor usually wins, but at least they have their say before a judge. If there were an advocate for the other side arguing the point, just that, you could have a government official with a national security clearance who goes in and argues the other side. Right? That's what lawyers do. The Supreme Court won't even hear a case unless you have someone to argue both sides. If, for example, the marriage equality cases. Well, the government of California agrees that denying gay people marriage equality is unconstitutional. And the federal government agrees that laws that discriminate against gay people are unconstitutional. So because the government officials agreed that their laws are unconstitutional, they had to find someone who thought that they were constitutional. So the Supreme Court said, hey, we need you, someone else to come in and argue the point. Both sides agreed that the court should hear the case. We want someone who was going to argue the court should not hear the case. They hired a lawyer to give that point of view. Why can't the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court have a devil's advocate, or maybe not the devil, a citizen's advocate, a civil libertarian advocate, maybe a former president of the ACLU who has a government security clearance, to go in and argue why the search warrant should not be granted. And then you hear both sides and the government decides. I have to wonder if the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, which is 11 judges appointed by the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts, I have to wonder if they would have approved the applications with such great numbers if there'd simply been an advocate on the other side to give the other side. How much have they approved it? Well, in 2012, there were some 2,000 plus applications to this court, and you know how many were approved? All of them. Oh, in 2011, there were 2,000 plus applications to this court, and all were approved except one. In fact, if you go and you look at the history of this court, you will find that they approved every single request made by Jimmy Carter, Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush. Thousands and thousands of requests. They approved every single request by Bill Clinton. All 6,056 were granted. One was denied. Okay, so all 518 by Carter were granted. All 4,294 by Reagan were granted. All 2,218 by George Herbert Walker Bush were granted. 6,056 out of 6,057 by Bill Clinton were granted. And under Obama, he's applied for 6,556 and only been denied once. One denial under Clinton, one denial under Obama. Of course, when it comes to unlawful surveillance, the granddaddy of all, it's got to be George Bush Jr. He made 14,353 applications to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. 9 were denied. So George Bush has the worst record of any president, but 1% were not denied. 0.1% were not denied. He got more than 99.9% of his requests granted. And overall, in the history of the court, 99.97% of all the requests were granted. And that sounds like a rubber stamp to me. And although the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court argues strenuously they are not a rubber stamp court, then why not allow an advocate for the other side just to come in and make the argument? I'm not even saying inform the targets. I'm just saying allow someone from the other side to come in to make the argument before you start granting all of these surveillance warrants. Meanwhile, of course, there's the program to oversee what we do on the internet, the so-called PRISM program. When I worked on the USA Patriot Act as a legislative attorney for Congressman Barney Frank in the House Judiciary Committee, one of the things that Barney Frank argued was you shouldn't be able to see every website that people go to. You shouldn't be able to see the domain names. You shouldn't be able to follow and see what we search on the internet. That is our private business, what we search on the internet. And again, I remind you, the biggest business on the internet is porn. Legal pornography, but maybe not the kind of thing that everybody wants to know that everyone else is looking for. Well, that was in our first version. I don't think that's being protected today. But we have a right as Americans to know the scope of what's being protected. We have the right to know what the government is watching and what they know about our behavior. Because this is the United States of America, and we don't want Big Brother. And I don't believe in these crazy conspiracy theories about the government being out to get us. But in an America where we don't even want our guns to be registered, and I think we should be fine with that, we certainly don't want the government following every single thing we say on the internet. Everything we do, everywhere we go, every web search we do. I don't like when Google does it. I don't like when Facebook does it. I don't like when private companies do it. I don't like data mining by credit card companies. You know what? Leave me alone. I have a right to be private, and I think you probably think you do too. If you want to call in, I'm going to give you one last chance to do so. 202-889-9797. 202-889-9797. This is Mark Levine. We'll be right back with more of the Inside Scoop right after this.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com. You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Dreyfus, and I want to tell you about my new favorite discovery, Yosemite National Park. I recently went there with my husband and children, and we walked the trails to see the breathtaking waterfalls, admired the grand meadows, and giant sequoias. But the future of our national parks is uncertain. Many challenges face our parks today, from polluted air and water to development threats outside their borders and inadequate funding to protect our national heritage. That's why the National Parks Conservation Association recently completed a decade-long assessment of the challenges facing our national parks, along with proposed actions that will ensure our children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy the parks as we have. Our national parks have inspired Americans for nearly 100 years. As we approach the centennial of the National Park Service in 2016, please join us in helping to protect our national park legacy. Find out how at www.npca.org.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. This is your host, Mark Levine. So, the Director of National Intelligence, a guy by the name of James Clapper, was asked a question under oath by Senator Ron Wyden, who's a Democrat from Oregon. He was asked the question of whether or not the NSA, the National Security Administration, collects any type of data at all on millions of Americans. No, sir, Clapper responded, and then added, not wittingly. The correct answer may be they collect it, but don't use it. Maybe. It can be unclear exactly what they can or cannot use, what they've done or have not done. I think I have a caller on the line. Caller, you're on the air with Mark Levine. This is the Inside Scoop. How are you?
Hey, Mark, it's Michael once again.
Hello, Michael, once again.
I had to call back because I just found something on Facebook on another page, and someone had made an interesting comment. And it goes back to how many times have we have seen and heard of President Obama playing chess with the Republicans, and you were just concerned and expressed great concern and so well about the use of the USA Patriot Act and this warrantless surveillance.
Right.
Okay? It could very well be, and this person, first first name I'm only going to be identifying as John. He says that it could very well be that President Obama is showing these very same Republicans that drafted and put together this law to target against Democrats, they're not liking being targeted themselves. So it could very well be that these same Republicans will be, quote, forced to toss over or do away with the Patriot Act and thus restore everybody's civil liberties or what have you.
Well, thanks for your call again, Michael. But I don't think this is political. I don't think that this is Obama trying to get back at the Republicans or spying on the Republicans. I think he's spying on everybody, just like Bush spied on everybody.
He might be spying on everybody, but what I'm saying is that the people who okayed it initially and probably were not being spied upon under Bush now don't like being spied upon, under Obama, and thus, it could be an unconstitutional thing. But the thing is, if it gets thrown out, then everybody's civil liberties and the Fourth Amendment is resurrected. That is indeed what the case is.
Okay.
Sometimes people have to learn the hard way.
Yeah, thanks for your call, Michael. I appreciate it. I actually think that this is something that Bush wanted to do, and he started, that Obama's continuing, that it's not really about politics at all. What it's about is the fact that they do want to go out and find terrorists. The problem is not the finding the terrorist portion of it, but the collecting the material for millions of Americans that have done absolutely nothing wrong. That's the part that concerns me. I really don't think this was done for political reasons, but sometimes things that are non-political, we need to join together, Democrats and Republicans, and say, hey, wait a minute, we have the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, and we want to make sure that we're protected. Thanks again for your call, Michael. I appreciate it. Let me just wrap up by saying that these are questions that have existed for a long time. If you listen to the Raucous Caucus, if you've been on the air listening for 2 hours, you heard Garland Nixon say this has been done since at least the 1950s. There was COINTELPRO, there was the Cold War, there's the McCarthy era. There's a whole history in the 60s of spying on anti-war protesters, and in the 70s, right up to today. This is nothing new. But that doesn't mean it's something that we should simply accept willingly. Just because it's not new doesn't mean that it's acceptable. The answer is the Constitution is the document that all presidents of the United States, all judicial officers, everyone on every court, district court, appellate court, foreign intelligence surveillance court, Supreme Court, and that every member of Congress takes an oath to uphold. They all raise their right hand and swear to uphold the United States Constitution, which includes the Fourth Amendment, which says that you have a right to be secure in your persons, papers, houses, and effects absent a warrant, showing probable cause, particularly describing the thing you've done wrong. And this needs to be questioned. Is this vast collection of data consistent with the Fourth Amendment? And don't give me the argument, well, we search it and we seize it, but we don't use it unless you're a bad guy. Well, that's not what the Fourth Amendment says. The Fourth Amendment doesn't say you can search and seize everything you want, but you can't use it against someone until you prove they're a terrorist. That's not in our Constitution. You could write it that way. That's not how they wrote it. They said you can't even search. You can't even seize. You have the right to be secure in your persons, houses, papers, or effects. In the 1700s, if they wanted to know what you were writing, they had to break into your house. Or they had to break the seal, literally the seal in an envelope. There was a wax seal that you put on your envelope so that if you wanted to read the letter inside, you could know if someone had read your mail. And you know what? Reading mail, snail mail, we still have snail mail today. It's a crime. We all know it's a crime. It's sacrosanct. Email, to me, should be just as secure as the mail we send in the post office. What's the difference? They're both private communications sent between individuals who expect their communication to be private. To me, it's a true violation of the Fourth Amendment if you want to treat email differently from snail mail, because it's the exact same idea. So now that, yes, Google knows who we're sending email to and where we go on the internet. And now that the phone companies know who we're calling, does that mean that suddenly the government has a right to view our communication? To know what we're saying? I don't know that the Obama administration is necessarily looking into this. I don't know that they're reading our emails or monitoring our phone calls. They deny it. They say it just has to do with foreign agents. But if that is the standard, then by gosh, government, write down your standard and write it down in law. Put out an executive order, put out legislation in Congress, an executive order by President Obama, put it out and tell us exactly when you can spy on us and when you can't. And I know they don't want to. They don't want to because they're like, well, the terrorists will find out when we're spying on them. Well, you know what? Bright lines help protect human rights. You can argue loopholes all you want, and suddenly we have no freedom anymore. So if the answer is that Americans who are not foreign agents, no probable cause, no warrants, no reason to believe they've committed a criminal act, no reason to believe they're a foreign agent or a foreign person, if ordinary law-abiding Americans are being covered, then we have something to worry about. And if they're not being covered, then make it clear. Make it distinct. Pass a law. Let us know what our rights are. Because this program began under George W. Bush, and it's not going away anytime soon. And if we progressives don't attack President Obama for doing this, then I guarantee you the Republicans will be very, very happy when the next Republican president does it. Pass the law now. Even if you trust Obama, pass a law, constrain him from doing the things he says he doesn't want to do anyway, and you don't harm the president at all. But you do constrain, if he is doing things we don't want him doing, or any future president, from taking away that important, essential right in the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution, the right of privacy. This is Mark Levine. This is The Inside Scoop. If you enjoyed my show, you should check out my website, marklevinetalk.com, where I will have this in every show, pretty much every show I've ever done. You can watch me on TV there, whether I'm on Fox News or Russian TV or Chinese TV or CNBC or wherever I go on. And if you want to follow me on Twitter at Mark Levine Talk, you will see and I will let you know when I'm going to be on the air, whether it's radio or TV or whatever. Just follow me at MarkLevineTalk, and you will find out when the next Inside Scoop is around the corner. I got to tell you this, tomorrow, you can see right on my website, we're doing a television show focusing on the Virginia primary campaign. Did you know, those of you in Virginia, there's an election this Tuesday, the day after tomorrow? There's a Democratic primary, and you get to decide between two very able candidates for both lieutenant governor and attorney general. And if you don't know those details, you got one last chance to find out. Go to my website, marklevinetalk.com. Tomorrow night at 7 p.m., we're doing a television show with representatives from all the campaigns so you know how to make an informed vote this Tuesday. So again, check out marklevinetalk.com. Follow me on Twitter at Mark Levine Talk. Follow me on Facebook. Join the fan page, the Mark Levine fan page. And of course, tune in every Sunday to We Act Radio AM 1480 for the Raucous Caucus at noon and the Inside Scoop at 1 o'clock. This is Mark Levine, and I am signing off.